You must be Gus.
Yep.
Deb. Deb Hackathorn. Nice to meet you. M Live. No fighting, Canepa. Oh yeah, great. I just have to put these down because I'm too short for this thing. I need a stool. I'm like, it's clear. That's kind of better than the old ones where I just look like a head above some wooden panel, but for sure. I forget. I had to give a speech one time for something. And again, it was like this. I mean, it was a wooden thing, and I'm standing behind it. I mean, you could only see that I had a head, you know. And so I just I moved and just projected. I was like, forget it, you know, forget it. I'm good. We discussed that. It's okay. Yeah. Kate will manage.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. CMC explores policy issues, current events, and lessons in leadership at forums like this every week. I'm Deb Hackathorn. I'm a principal with Frost Brown Todd in Government Affairs. I'm also proud to serve as the chair of the CMC Board of Trustees. For those of you joining us today by live stream, we welcome you to our home here in Columbus's historic Italian village, the Ellis. If you scan the QR code at your table, you'll see the many organizations that support your not-for-profit Columbus Metropolitan Club. Thank you to our host, the Ellis, for their generous support for today's program. We're also grateful to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. Please join me in thanking everyone for supporting today's forum. With the November passage of Issue 2, Ohio became the 24th state to legalize recreational marijuana. Marijuana's approval means the industry is poised for major expansion in Ohio, with predictions that the first year of sales could reach $2 billion and even climb from there to $4 billion or more a year in the future. While the exact details of legal cannabis in Ohio are still being ironed out at the State House and in the administration, one thing is for sure: pot is poised to become both incredibly lucrative and pervasive in Ohio, if it's not already pervasive in Ohio. With today's expert panel, we're going to unpack the present and future of Ohio's blooming cannabis industry. Very nice. And now it's my honor to introduce today's panelists. Please give a warm CMC welcome to, immediately on my left, Gus Burns, cannabis industry reporter with M Live. Jim Canepa, superintendent of the Division of Cannabis Control within the Ohio Department of Commerce. Ariane Kirkpatrick, CEO of Harvest of Ohio. And to our host, Kate Seifert, a reporter with ABC6 and Fox 28 Columbus. Kate, welcome to CMC. We look forward to today's discussion.
All right, everyone, thanks for having me. You can hear me okay, yeah? Okay, so I want to start, let's just kick things right off with James Canepa, but he alerted me he likes to go by Jim. So Jim, your role is brand new in Ohio. So can you explain to people what you're doing every day now that you've moved from liquor to cannabis control within the Department of Commerce?
Test 1, 2. You have to hold the mic a certain way, and you got to like pause, and there's all these rules. So I'm going to try to remember what they are. But anyway, Kate and I were talking earlier. She asked me that question, and it's very similar to my former role. For those of you who know me from the division of liquor. So I was the superintendent there for 7 years. And mainly my role is to fairly, responsibly permit folks who grow cannabis, process cannabis, sell cannabis, test cannabis. And so my focus right now is really on coming up with the rules that are required and set forth, and the timeline set forth in the initiated statute. You know, they're pretty well marked out. June 7th for to have the applications ready, and September 7th to have to start issuing permits. And so, like liquor, it is a process of issuing the permits, and then a process of compliance enforcement of those permit privileges in each regard. And so in a nutshell, that's what I've been focused on doing, meeting those deadlines, as well as scaling up the staff to meet those additional demands from what it was for medical cannabis for the last 5 years into what will now become, you know, a whole different retail demand.
And with the changes that you were working on, Jim, obviously that will impact businesses like Harvest. And so, RN, I want to ask you, how are you guys preparing for the changes, or how have you already been preparing for probably months now for the change of being able to eventually sell recreational cannabis out of your businesses?
Interesting. I keep changing the topic of our meetings because yours ready, set, grow. And so we call our philosophy for getting ready for recreational ready, set, go. But we probably should have used grow because it makes more sense. But we are preparing, looking at all different avenues. We have all of our division leaders looking at, HR, our staffing. How are we going to do staffing? We're looking at parking. So we're looking at the different ordinances of the cities of where we're located to make sure we have the proper parking. Looking at different avenues as far as like drive-through, because some of our locations might have been limited already as far as capacity. But we know that it's going to be a lot more people. I've had the opportunity to look at some of the locations in Detroit and Arizona. Arizona was interesting because they had medical and recreational in the same site. And so we were very interested in looking and seeing how they operated that. So it was pretty packed too. And they made it work.
And we have Gus here to give us that perspective from Michigan, right? Because Michigan, recreational cannabis has been legal there for some time. You've been reporting on it for some time as well. Can you talk about, Gus, maybe some of the things that you have seen, whether it's successes or maybe missteps that Ohio can learn from that you have seen in Michigan when it comes to the marijuana industry there?
Well, our market is a little different than Ohio's in the sense that there is no limit on the number of licenses. So it's gotten to a point now where we have over 770 retail licenses. And so that has caused some business struggles as far as some can't stay afloat, some close, and new ones take their place or they don't take their place. So I think I don't hear a lot of complaints about that. I just know that it's made it a tougher market for the businesses. I just think that's going to be a lot different than what you're seeing in Ohio. And our medical licensing has basically plummeted, basically doesn't exist anymore. It's still there because it's part of a law, but all the sales have become recreational. And it's gotten to the point where I think anywhere in Michigan, you can drive, a half hour to an hour and get to a store. So it's really proliferated. And also along the borders, both the Western UP and obviously the Ohio border. So what Ohio decides to do that impacts what products are available, and the cost to the consumers will definitely impact who's crossing the border.
So Jim, are there going to be rules as far as how many dispensaries can be in certain jurisdictions? I know when we were speaking earlier, there's rules when it comes to where schools are located, playgrounds and different things. Can you talk about that as far as, these dispensaries, areas becoming inundated with them?
So there are really three guiding principles. One is access. That's a concept that's in the initiated statute. It contemplates fair access throughout the state of Ohio. The other concept is the black market and how the new retail non-medical landscape can impact the black market. And then the third concept, which informs on how this is going to roll out in terms of density, is the idea that over-concentration has negative impacts, one of which Gus mentioned, failure rate. I've at the front end of my opportunity here as a new superintendent, I've met with stakeholders in the medical landscape already. And one of the common themes is failure rate. And when the dispensaries are bumper to bumper to bumper, there are going to be winners and losers. And so having, empty, vacant storefronts with where used to be businesses, whether they're, old bars and restaurants that are not successful or old other retail locations that dot the landscape, is not a good look at the end of the day. So those three guiding principles really are going to inform how this rolls out in terms of density and access. In terms of where dispensaries are going to go, really, it's going to be a function of three things. It's the locals have great leverage in determining if and when dispensaries will be in those local jurisdictions. Many of them are opting out. Many of them are in a wait and see posture. And even if they entertain the idea of a dispensary opening, they have opportunities to remove them. And so the locals are going to retain a lot of control. So it's important, just like any other retail community member, to be good community citizens. And so I saw it in liquor for 6 years. The ones that are successful are good community leaders. The ones that aren't successful are the ones who really aren't accountable to their permit privileges and to the community. And so with those three, or with those sort of limitations, the locals, but you also have what we call statutory objectors. Those are the schools, the playgrounds, the parks, where in the law it's already built into those are buffer zones. And then the final is a 1 mile buffer, which will prevent them from picking out locations that are, in real estate, it's location, 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 as you've heard. And so for many, they are going to want to be in the same place. And without a buffer zone, they would be right on top of each other, and it would be, winner take all in terms of customers. So to prevent that, the failure rate, to kind of spread the wealth, those three limiting factors are really going to come into play.
Sure. When we were covering this as a station, leading up to Election Day, we covered, every side, but one of the things that we kept hearing was, what will happen to our economy? How will this impact our economy? So I want to ask you, Gus, about how you saw Michigan's economy change after recreational marijuana was legalized.
I mean, when you go community to community, obviously there's old businesses that were vacant that are now nice storefronts. And really, I think the biggest economic change is the amount of tax money that's bringing in. We have a system where if you have a license, you get a share of the excise tax at the end of the year. So the community, encourages communities to participate. So a lot of these smaller communities are getting significant amounts of money that they're using, for their local government. I don't think it really changed the landscape of Michigan that much, except for certain towns, like maybe border towns where people are really piling the stores in. So you drive through town, you see 5 stores in a 4 square mile community, but it really doesn't feel like it's totally changed the landscape economically even. It does have some impact, but it's not like we're a new state because we have marijuana now. I did want to go back to one aspect of
Sure, of course.
that I missed kind of earlier. And the black market is obviously, when I talk about black market, I'm talking about the black market, big scale stuff that's working its way into the licensed market. We kind of had an avenue for that to happen legally because early on, because we were trying to get our inventory up. But I think that if you clamp down early and let people know you're watching because there's an inventory system to see, like, well, that doesn't make sense. If you start letting people know you're looking early, you reduce the chances that these big people are bringing in truckloads from California and inserting it into your market.
Ariana, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add as far as the oversaturation and talk about economics, because it's 2 different type of economics
Yeah.
we're working with. The economics of the business owners. So when you have the oversaturation, you do not give people the ability to thrive in their businesses. And it may be, it's not like the auto mile or the furniture stores all next to each other. This is a different type of market. The state of Ohio has done well with the liquor market when at first, I'm sure, I don't want to show my age, but we always called them the state store. And then eventually the state stores were allowed to come into certain grocery stores, but it's still regulated. I know people hate rules and regulations, but I come from city government, and I think it's very important for us to do it so we can control the density of what we have. We don't want to see the economics turn into issues as far as socioeconomics. When you put too many places and don't have any restrictions or regulations, sometimes you get a lot of bad seeds. In Portland, Oregon, they have I think they have the highest number, over 700, and it has not been good for the state of the city as far as crime. Because you can't control everything. The state of Ohio has a different program. I like ours. I know a lot of people complain. I complain about the state all the time when I was trying to get open. Even today, I complain a little bit. I was cracking up when she said pot in her introduction, because Lord, let me say pot on anything. Jim's gonna come get me. But so the saturation and the regulation is very important. I'm excited to see how the state unfolds this. I came to get the tea.
So
I think that's like one thing we were always warned about, is the crime was going to go up. I haven't seen that. And I think most of the Michigan industry is happy, even though there might be some places that are too competitive and some places close. Overall, I think people like the looseness of the Michigan market.
1, 2, there's my pause. Okay, so I appreciate the analog to the liquor agencies in the state of Ohio. So this is something that I'm proud of. In that liquor space, the liquor agencies, there are 490 in the state that provide all the spirituous liquor for the entire state. And those business owners who have the contract with the state to sell that spirituous liquor are very, very much tuned into their market demographic. When we do expand in that space, we look at market data. We do the same research that Target uses, that Cabela's uses, that grocery stores used. And it's a market research firm that looks at white space, access, and cannibalization on other businesses. And what we're looking for are economic opportunities, not just for the community, but for the existing business owners to remain successful. So we want to lift all boats, make the local economy thrive, but we don't want oversaturation where we put those stores. The other analog in the liquor space, and it's ironic, and there's a few, city officials here. You were a former city official, but I would always get calls in liquor from a state rep or a mayor or a council person, and they'd be like, I've got a constituent who wants to open a bar on a corner in downtown, fill in the blank, Toledo, Youngstown, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Dayton, and the locals are objecting, and you sustain the objection, and my constituent is really upset about that. And my rejoinder to that is, that is really what is fair, is the locals have an opportunity to chime in and decide what is good for that location. And at the end of the day, where those bars or retail owners are opening is where the property, real estate, lease, and rent is affordable. And where is it most affordable? In the urban areas, in downtown areas. And so what consequently happens is the liquor permit and the cannabis permit migrate to where it's most affordable rent. And that's why you have over concentration in those urban areas. And so I remember the former mayor of Toledo, who's now in the legislature, she was like, oh, you're right. That is an important point. And so not only does it facilitate failures of the businesses themselves, but it just becomes a self-fulfilling over concentration of businesses on every street corner that sell liquor or sell cannabis or check cashing, those sorts of things.
I guess I haven't seen the failure rate is not that high in Michigan, though. You got like 770. I think I saw like 150 licenses are gone now over 4 years into our fifth. And what the worst outcome is usually you get a renovated building in a town that was it was dilapidated before, or you get a warehouse or production facility that millions of dollars was put into and it failed. So it makes the property more attractive even if the business within it fails.
Go ahead, Ariane. Yeah.
You said 150 out of 700 have closed?
I think it would be in addition to the 770 that are active right now, about 150 show no longer active.
That's 20%.
I think it's 15-ish, yeah.
Okay.
It's significant, but
That's a percentage that to me is not acceptable. If I had a 20% failure rate on liquor agencies, I would have been removed from my position. So here, the idea, and everybody has to keep in mind that at the front end of this is sort of an anomalous time on the timeline. It's this time in our evolution of the cannabis market where basically overnight, we are going to add between 200 to 250 dispensaries on the map, like in a blink of an eye. That's not the normal state of affairs. Usually it's an iterative process, like I described in the liquor space, where we very thoughtfully do market analysis and study where it makes sense to expand. We're not there yet, but we will be there. But first we have this anomalous challenge. I call it the Big Bang theory. It's like overnight, the map has got to be populated. There's only so many ways to do that responsibly. And that's really what I'm kind of laser focused on, is how to responsibly do that. And then 24 months, as laid out in the initiated statute, 24 months from September 7th will be net new dispensaries. And then that will be more of an iterative, thoughtful market research approach.
I think this industry is already becoming big business. When it first started, there was this idea that people who are affected by, the war against drugs were going to have this opportunity. And I think Michigan did its best to try to allow that to happen, and it has in certain pockets, but no matter what, it's expensive to open up a marijuana store. So I think giving more opportunities to people, even if they end up failing, if you limit it too much, is this going to be big business? And it's probably going to go that way eventually anyway, but right off the bat, that's what you're going to get.
All right, I want to talk to you about that aspect of opportunity. So with the legalization of recreational marijuana, do you anticipate being able to hire more people, to open more dispensaries? What does that look like from your perspective today?
Oh, that's a question for Jim. But really, see, I'm.
I do have some observations, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it
So
first.
I think so. And then I also wanted to talk about just a tad bit on the war on drugs and the opportunities, and back to the 20%, because I am hoping, and I really think that Ohio has a classy market of the medical marijuana. Are things overregulated? Yes, they were, and I think they will continue to be, and will continue to fight for things like that. But I think it's really classy the way that we're doing it. And I am hoping that Ohio can be a model on how to do it right. Look at the best management practices of other states and how they did it. How can we unfold it? Because that's what's key. And especially with me being a minority Black female in this industry, directly affected from my family being charged in this industry years ago. I hope that we can get the social equity right about it, that we can concentrate on it, because my chances, if that's that 20% there, is, you know, it's only 2% in the whole United States of people that look like me in this market. And I would gather that probably 150 of those folks, that over 50% of them look like me in the failure rate. But we don't want to set it up for failure here in Ohio. I think that we'll unfold it right. Just a lot of the decisions that the state are doing now, the positiveness, how we have the implementation. We have a board member here from, what is our new name? OH-CAN? OH-CAN. Oh, I didn't see. How you doing? Okay, so, but we're working collaboratively with the state, and when you have too many of anything, it's not good. I didn't answer your question, but you go ahead and say that.
So my observation. So I visited a lot of different licensees, labs, cultivators, processors, dispensaries, and you know, two things strike me when I'm in these places. One is if an urgent care and a Starbucks had a child, that's what it kind of looks like. It's very like clinical, but accommodating and clean and secure. Or if you've ever been to Greenbrier in West Virginia, anybody ever been to Greenbrier? It's like the bunker that Congress has to go to if there's ever a problem. These cultivation operations are huge, but like the floors are polished and it's clinical and it's very secure. So that was the first observation. The second observation was the beehive of people working there and dedicated people working there in rural operations, in urban operations, in city operations. And they were all really like, and I made a point of asking, I'm like, a woman, you know, with little tiny scissors, clipping stems off a bud all day long. And I'm like, hey, do you like your job? I love my job. Love my job. Or the folks in the kitchen, you know, brewing up their gummies and whatnot. I'm like, do you like your job? And they're like, love my job. Love my job. They're all just very dedicated, and lots of them, lots of staff that otherwise, you know, would be, you know, looking for employment other places. And so those two things were really impressive. You know, I will also say that like my only gear that I have as a regulator in lots of different lifetimes in similar positions, and I've only been put in positions to either fix really screwed up things, or to stand up really brand new innovative things. Those are the only jobs I've ever had. But in each one, working with the people in the industry is key, absolutely key, because they're business people. They typically are very well ingrained in the community. Many of them are business owners in other respects outside of cannabis, and they have very specific ideas about what the challenges and opportunities are. So I would never, ever enter a space pretending like I had all the answers. In fact, my my move, we haven't really talked at length yet, but my move at the very beginning is to front load meeting with stakeholders to get the punch list. It's what I did in liquor. I got the punch list, and I went down the punch list where I could raise all boats. You know, my MO is not to just help that person or just help that licensee. It's to raise all boats responsibly. Responsibly. In liquor, when I started in 17, revenue for the entire state, gross revenue was $970 million for spirituous liquor. When I left at the end of December, it was 1.8 billion. Now you figure out that ROI as a business owner.
Oh, I can't figure out that percentage. That's
Okay.
a big number there.
That's more than 20%.
More than 20%.
Yeah. And the reason for that was not volume. It was not volume. It was premiumization, or your word, classy. It was premiumization of responsible selling. That's what it was.
I'm glad you said that. Because, and you talk about the staff, our team members are so excited to be included and a part of this industry. The knowledge, the training, and our customers, our patients are just so important to us because we have a trained and educated staff. We, while I've had mom and pop businesses, and I think mom and pop businesses are key, but we have operated our business as if we were a big Fortune 500 with the whole principles, our people process. We have the 5 Ps. And how do we turn that into a positivity for our employees? We keep them engaged. So we're trying to figure out exactly how do we go from medical to recreational, because we have our brand ambassadors. We always talk about the qualifying conditions, but then we know there's another market out there of people that actually have conditions. That one of my team members asked me yesterday in my other business that has high blood pressure. And he says, and I don't want to get addicted to all of these different pills that everybody else is taking. Me, myself, I can speak for that. He said, and I just want to find just the right thing to take, just because I'm high blood pressure. And he said, I never wanted to get the medical card because I didn't want that stigma and I didn't want the thing. So this is going to be exciting and we're going to be prepared for that. So we have decided we're not doctors, we're not pharmacists, but we understand the product. We are educated and our team members are. We're going to still keep that same ambassador type of knowledge and formality in the way we do business at Harvest, which is actually Mabuno, but that's another story for another topic in another day, a different forum if you want to invite me on that one. But so our employees are going to be a key to making this successful.
Gus, I feel like you're wanting to chime in.
Just a couple things that were mentioned. First of all, we do have towns that have been totally transformed by marijuana businesses. If it's a small town and you bring a couple in, it does change the city, and they shop in the city and stuff like that. So it can change the face of a city. And then as far as if access really is what you're looking for, if that's one of your top priorities, Michigan has done a great job at that through the competition. Prices are really low. You can drive almost anywhere and get what you want. And I think the customers in Michigan really love the system right now.
I want to talk a little bit about accountability. That's something that we heard a lot about ahead of Election Day. And Jim, I'll ask you this, that idea of making sure, and it's something we heard our governor even talk about too, making sure these products aren't attractive to kids. And, when it does become, when people are able to legally purchase recreational cannabis, to make sure it doesn't get in the wrong hands and everything is done, like you had said, firmly, fairly, responsibly. Can you talk about how that is becoming really a part of your focus?
So again, I only have one gear as a regulator, and it is responsible, accountable, and fair. And really, there's two objectives in that approach. One is, from the industry perspective, is you have to have a fair playing field. Think about it like this. If your permit privileges require a certain standard criteria for compliance. And there are others who are flaunting that criteria standard. It's not fair to the other, it's not a fair playing field to the people who are responsibly following and complying with their permit privileges. And so, again, in my other lifetimes, including liquor, absolutely maintaining a fair playing field by enforcement and compliance of the requirements is significant to maintaining a fair level playing field. You know, if one retailer down the street is drawing in all kinds of underage customers because it makes them money, it's against the law, but it's also unfair to the one that is up the street who's following the rules, because where are the customers being siphoned off to? You know, so I saw it in liquor. I've heard about it in the cannabis space. So, you know, one thing that the permit holders are going to have to get used to is I will help them be successful within the rules. But if they fall outside of the rules, my first response is, let's look at that mistake. That's a learning opportunity. The second time the same mistake is made, they'll be put on a performance improvement plan with a very tight timeline for improvement. The third time, I start to feel like you're poking me in the eye. And it's probably because you shouldn't have those permit privileges. And we'll start the process of removing you from the field of play. But the other thing, again, in my other lifetime, and it's the only gear that I have, there can be zero tolerance for two things. One is selling, appealing, or accommodating underage sales, underage advertising. I have a 13-year-old. The thing that keeps me awake at night is the idea that whether it's liquor or cannabis, that it's something to be enjoyed by children. And so, you know, hand in hand with that is, you know, if, you know, toga culture is what a permit holder is trying to appeal to as a liquor permit holder, they got their butts kicked because that is not appropriate. If stoner culture is what people are hoping for, I'm not your guy. You know, so it's going to be professional, it's going to be responsible, it's going to be accountable. And if diverting and appealing to children, whether it's advertising, labeling, packaging, not following the under 21 sales rules, there's zero tolerance for that. It was zero tolerance in the liquor space. There will be zero tolerance here. And so, you know, there are going to be challenges with that. My experience is 80% of the permit holders want to be accountable and responsible. But there are some on the ends of the bell curve that are going to test that, and I welcome it.
And before you jump in, Gus, I just want to give a heads up. We're going to open up questions for the audience as well as those who are on live stream. So if you are in the audience and have a question, you can make your way to the microphone where you see Doug right here waving his hand. If you're listening on live stream, you can go ahead and type your question in the chat and we'll make sure we get those questions for you. But Gus, I want you to jump in. I felt like you wanted to chime in on this aspect. Sure.
I guess real quick, I assume you're going to apply a lot of the same methods that Michigan did with advertising. You know, we try to keep out that stoner marketing style, but there's so many rules in Michigan with the stores, with the video cameras and everything. I haven't heard a lot of problems with the stores selling to minors. If it's happening, it's secondary. You know, someone going in buying a bunch of product and then reselling it. So I haven't heard a lot of that problem at our store level, licensee level.
No questions quite yet. No questions from the.
No, we're ready. If you're ready. Great. Okay. Kate, thank you very much. And also thank you to today's panelists. I know many of you probably in the room here have questions for our panelists. So please do come up here and line up behind me. We'll get to as many as we can. Two ground rules for great questions at CMC. They have two things in common. A great question can be asked in less than 30 seconds, and a great question does end in a question mark. Those are our requested ground rules. Thank you, everyone. So here's a question to get us started. It's for Ariane. Ariane, how difficult is it to raise capital to get into the cannabis industry? What are the special challenges?
Wow. Yeah, that's, I sure can. Raising capital in the cannabis industry was very difficult. Thanks to the social equity that originally was there, the minority set-aside program, I did have the opportunity to take advantage to get into an industry that I really wanted to be a part of, that I thought that we should, and I was happy. It wasn't easy for someone like me to just walk into a bank and say, hey, I need this, or walk up to investors, because it's really, you really need a couple $1 million, to be honest with you. It's not something that you can just start mom and pop and just say, oh, I just want to open. And so many people walk up to you and say, I want to open it. And you look at them like, yeah, you just don't know all the regulations. It is quite difficult. I have learned that now that I have been in the business and we've become accomplished and we've been a great successful business, it is easier for me to do the ask. I have a relationship with my bank, and I said, hey, if I would like to get this opportunity, and can I get a line of credit? And where before I didn't have the voice to do that, I do have that, because we've proven ourselves. Our financial statements are wonderful and awesome. We're a highly respected company. We have built a brand that I can be very proud of. Anytime you have a new industry, it's going to be difficult. So you need to be really, really prepared.
Okay, question. Are you going to require labeling so that they've used additives or food coloring or anything else in the packaging of the the marijuana?
Are you going to require that, Ariane?
I'm not sure.
I don't understand the question.
If you're talking about there's labels, strict labeling on packaging right now. So I'm not sure if you've been in a facility, but we have been smacked for not having something on our label that might not have been that bad. It was unintentional, but the state of Ohio really regulates the labeling requirements. So.
Ingredients, that are in there. I remember, and I visited just through our coverage several different processing facilities too. It even shows, THC level. Everything is on there. Can you talk about that too?
Well, it is, and matter of fact, I wish I can get Bill to talk a little bit about that, because he's one of the top processors. Benelli's, give him a shout out in the room. But any and everything that you do, the testing facility, that's another thing that I just wanted to touch on real quick. The testing, the reason that it's good to have the regulations in the recreational is because you're not going to get a product, off the street. You're not going to get that tested. And many times I had a guy that was in my class, school friend, valedictorian, star football player, went away to college, got some product, marijuana, laced with something, and his mind is not right to this day. Very sad. That's not going to happen in our stores with labeling rules and regulations that's already in place.
Thank you. Columbus has seen a proliferation of DORAs, designated outdoor refreshment areas, where you can walk around with an alcoholic beverage in certain areas. Will we see something similar for cannabis use?
So let me rewind that and give you a forensic analysis of that timeline. When DORAs were first proposed, you might as well have been running over people's puppies. It was something that was like, what? People walking around with drinks in their hands in the community, the local communities fought back, weren't having it, no way. And, that was an evolution over time that it proceeded and evolved as a function of what the locals had an appetite for. So your question is directed to the wrong person. Your question should be directed to the locals and legislators as to what the appetite for those sorts of things are. I will tell you that Doras were like Voldemort. Don't mention it in my community. But you know, now it has evolved, and there are opportunities for such things that are very, very responsible and accountable on boundaries, on carding, on who can participate. You know, it's a mini police state inside those boundaries. So, you know, be careful what you ask for. But again, I will say, you know, the presumption in that question is, boop, overnight doors were a thing. Well, no, not the way it happened.
So my question is probably more directed to Jim, but we know that right now we have this amendment that passed, but we also have the General Assembly that is working on legislation that could impact that. So it might be helpful for people following it or not following it that closely to know, you know, what will happen if the General Assembly does nothing, or what might you anticipate coming out of that legislative process before all of this kicks in?
So I feel like that 70s commercial about how a bill becomes a law. I mean, we could all sing it together. But the long story, very, very short, is this was an initiated statute, right? And so whether it's initiated by a legislator on the House side or the Senate side, typically that bill gets refined and tweaked and played around with. Here, the initiated statute set out, you know, some basic guidelines, timeframes, and in the absence of action by the legislature, those are my marching orders. Okay, and the question, you know, a lot of folks looking at this think, well, the legislature has to do something at this point for this to all become effective. No, that's not the case. The initiated statute lays out the requirements and the timelines. What everybody expected, what I expected, what most people expected is that the legislature would chime in, and one of my favorite words, my lawyer laughs at me when I say this, to put their imprimatur on it in some way, put their fingerprints on it in some way. One of the issues that everybody hoped that they would put their imprimatur on is the dual use. You know, the easy button would have been the legislature to come to some agreement about existing medical dispensaries selling non-medical cannabis in short order. That would have been the easy button. In the absence of that easy button, Jim and his staff are left to fill that vacuum by meeting the initiated statute timelines. Doing that by getting as much feedback, input, buy-in that I can from the permit holders and the public through the CSI process and through the JCAR process, which both are intended to poke holes and refine and move the landscape in terms of rules and how it looks in the industry. At the other end of it, the hope is that you know, the participants and the public feel like everybody got equal preference or equal not preferences. And so that's kind of the place that we're hoping for. What would be tragic is as we're rounding third base on the way to home and meeting these timelines, the legislature jumps in then. That would be disappointing to me.
Wondering how many medical dispensaries do we have now, and how did you come up with that 200 to 250 number? And then maybe a year, September 2025, how many dispensaries you would expect that we would have?
Really, really good question. We could have a whole nother forum on it, maybe even a community college course over a 8-week period. But the short answer, as short as I can make it, is the initiated statute set out in section 10B, the existing permit holders who get what we call a bonus or a gift. This wasn't a gym thing. This was a initiated statute thing. It's under section 10B. Read it. There are certain current permit holders that get 1. There are certain permit holders that get 3, and depending on how you analyze, which we are doing, mergers and acquisitions to determine, control and financial interest, it'll determine the number of dispensaries that are gifted or that are bonus to the existing permit holders. And so when I say between this and this, it's because that merger and acquisition analysis hasn't been done. And, to the point made before, in terms of how you raise money and how you finance these things, it's big business, and it's investors, and it's stockholders, and all of them have a financial interest, but maybe not control, or a certain percentage of financial interest. And all of those things come down to a mergers and acquisitions analysis, which will determine who gets a 10B license. And when I say between, it's because I'm looking in my crystal ball right now and giving you the best answer I can. And again, the initiated statute says 24 months from the September 7th date. There is a opportunity for net new outside of the existings. That's an application process. It's a qualification process. Like the liquor space, there are financial requirements, there are background checks, there are all of those sorts of things that the existing permit holders have to go through. The current initiated statute calls for 50 social equity dispensaries that the Department of Development is tasked to come up with a program on what that looks like, what the requirements are, and who gets those. That's outside of my role. So in all, somewhere between 200 and 250 of 10B licenses, an additional 50 for social equity. I'm a lawyer, you do the math. And then after that 24-month period, we start looking at that iterative market analysis, what makes sense approach.
So given that marijuana is still federally illegal, and I know in other states the dispensaries can't utilize the banking and credit card systems, what regulations and security measures are being thought of to ensure, safety for what will likely be cash-only businesses?
Well, I can give you the short answer, and one of the owners here can chime in. But the medical program has been in place for 5 years. The medical security requirements have been in place for 5 years. To a lesser or greater degree, the permit holders embrace or have different ideas about how that should look. So we're really not dreaming up anything new for the non-medical. It'll be more of a scaling process. It'll be accommodating more volume within that paradigm that they're already familiar with. Part of the rule packages will be proposing the security to deal with the volume of non-medical customers that are not patients. And so really, I'm going to prevail upon stakeholders to say, hey, like what works at the point, what is going to work at the point of sale while maintaining security? And so, I don't have a laser clarity on what that's going to look like yet, because we haven't proposed the rules and we haven't gotten stakeholder feedback, but I know that is a particular area of interest for them.
So it's become a little easier to navigate financially because it's not this whole big cash thing. It's that where you think, oh, there are tons and tons of cash in, because there are systems where we are using different type of cards. And I think we're going to see, and I'm hoping and that we see some changes soon federally. Senator Chair Brown is the head of the banking committee, and they, if you remember, just recently finally passed the acts to make that to make some serious changes there. And also, I'm hoping that we see the change of from being a Schedule I drug soon. Also, I believe that the DEA is looking into some things to make some changes there. And I'm not sure how many we have now. I know in the first round, because there were 2 rounds. In the first round, we were probably the last ones. We were number 66, 67, and 68 dispensaries at that time. It took us 3 years, 6 months, and 25 days to get open for a lot of reasons. The second round we saw was a lot easier, and some got open quicker, and that's because folks are learning, the state is learning, and so there's not that many hardships. But as far as the financial terms, yep, they're easing up.
Thank you. We have about 3, about two minutes left now. And the questions are just rolling in. So we'll try to get to maybe 2 of them really quickly. Question for Gus. If Michigan could go back in time, would its rollout have looked different, i.e. lessons learned?
If you ask the regulators, probably. I think it got to a point where they were considering trying to get new rules to cap licenses. Actually, going back to prior to our recreational, I mean, we had a state level board that was actually the gatekeeper. And I think that was the learning lesson that led to the way our market is now. Our chair of that board, I believe, is in prison for corruption. They're just like I think in a lot of ways, Michigan is pretty happy with the way they rolled it out. If you talk to the people at the state level, I think that it's disseminated a lot of the responsibilities. There's a huge amount of money coming into marijuana. They're very litigious. The state doesn't want to be the sole direct focus of all that.
And we have about just about a minute left, but this is a big question to answer in a minute, but it's a really good one. With the legalization of cannabis in Ohio, how do we ensure that policies prioritize equity and justice, particularly for communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs?
I'm the victim. I need help. We have to make sure that the socioeconomics and the social equity, social justice is just not forgotten. It is so important in so many industries, and especially this industry, in a field where we have been overcharged. We need to be overcompensated.
Michigan, like a lot of other states, have listed a focus of trying to help out with social equity programs. I don't know how successful they've been. One tactic that was used in Detroit that I think was useful was they had a bunch of lawsuits because they were trying to find a way to get their local market run by local people. One of the ways they did that was give some treatment, preferential treatment to longtime residents of the city. So they're going to be challenged if you do things like that. Like Detroit probably spent a lot of money on lawsuit defense, but people are trying to find ways to keep it so it's not just the huge chains coming and swooping in and taking everything over.
On that Michigan, my mic went on that Michigan thing. I remember they were allowed to have like 5 patients. I mean, it actually precipitated a worse social equity, social justice system that I saw that was just horrific. And I think they learned from that, and it really caused a lot of that failure rate, I think. And I am just so happy that the state of Ohio has, in so many ways, tried to protect, but want to make sure that they do that social equity and social justice, because it is so important for all of us to have access, economics, and socioeconomics.
If you don't end on that note, then you're messed up.
All right, and with that, we are going to wrap things up. Obviously, so much to talk about with this topic, but Deb is going to wrap everything up for us. Thank you so much for having me.
Should we ask if today's forum was mind altering or something? I know, really bad jokes today. Thank you so much to the Ellis for hosting us today. Thank you to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And a very special thank you and appreciation to today's speakers, Gus Burns, Jim Canepa, Ariane Kirkpatrick, and our host, Kate Seifert. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Next week's CMC program, the annual State of Downtown Forum, is actually sold out, but do make plans to join us through the live stream if you haven't already purchased a ticket or a table. Thanks again to everyone. We could not do this without you, and have a wonderful afternoon.